Hey guys, welcome to this video on volunteering for OneInMath. I'm Irvi, I'm the creator of OneInMath, and I hope you enjoy this presentation. So let's start with what is OneInMath? OneInMath is a self-paced and independent, supervised program for young children. What this means is that we want to allow each student to learn in their own environment at their own pace, for them to best learn basic arithmetic skills. This is for grades K through 2 and it's a free program. So our main goal is to help young kids build a strong foundation in basic arithmetic, which is addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. And we do this using 4 things: technology, tutoring, practice, and commitment. To expand a little bit, technology is usually used alongside practice and with worksheets that we have. And the main way we use technology is with videos, and I'm in the process of creating videos that go along with each packet. So when the student goes home, they can watch that video and learn at home as well as in the classroom. So our second point is having the best of the tutoring or classroom environment, where you have an expert or a one-on-one tutor to help each student individually. The third thing is practice. We believe that for you to be successful at math, you have to practice a lot. And that's kind of what we do in this program. And the last thing is commitment. We feel that the student and the parent must be committed to the program and must be committed to getting better at math for this program to work. So how does it work? So the first thing you would do when a student walks into your classroom is you would go through a diagnostic test with them. Or you would give them a diagnostic test, actually. And I'll talk a little bit more about this later on. And the next thing you would do is you would give them practice sheets depending on where they are in our program. So our program is divided into modules or sections, which are then broken down into the different packets. So each module builds on the previous one, and I'll give an example of a module. An example of a module is adding 0 through 5 to 0 through 5, which means both the numbers that you're adding are between 0 and 5, if that makes sense. And at the end of each section or module, there's an evaluation test that the student has to take, so we can make sure that they understand all the concepts that they've learned in the section and they can do those, and they've mastered those. So the organization of our program. So you guys, as volunteers, you're going to have around 4 to 6 students you're going to be in charge of by yourself. And you're going to have a volunteer buddy who basically is someone that you can go to. Let's say you can't come one day. So what you would do is you emailed me, you would email your lead volunteer, which I'll explain in just a second, and you would email your volunteer buddy. And between us 3, someone will take your students and be in charge of your students for that one class while you can't be there. And that's kind of the role of the volunteer buddy. So the next position is a lead volunteer, and we have 1 per section or session and location. And their job is basically supervise each session and help out you guys as volunteers. And they walk around and help the students and stuff like that too. And they also are supposed to handle some of the logistics between you guys and the students. We also have a parent volunteer who's supposed to basically just support the lead volunteer, and they manage all the logistics, which include printing and talking to librarians, talking to the parents who come and drop by, stuff like that. So specifically as a volunteer, what are you supposed to do? So like I said earlier, you're going to be in charge of 4 to 6 students, and that means they're your students and you're fully responsible for them. So that means you have to document each student's progress. That's your main goal as a volunteer, to see their progress and see how they improve. So it's really important that you document this, and I'll explain this a little bit more later on. You also have to print out all their packets that they have to do, which includes homework and classwork. So that's also really important. When they first enter class, you have to check their homework, and at the end of class, you have to check their classwork and kind of assess their accuracy. And you can also it's also important that you ask them these things orally. So not only can they just do it on paper, but they understand the concept, and they can do it in their head too. Also, you have to be able to work with each student one-on-one and teach them new concepts or help them master old ones, and kind of just make sure that they're on the right track. And As a volunteer, you're also responsible to report to me, so that means that you have to um, follow certain guidelines, which I'll explain a bit more. But one of the main things I would like you guys to do is reply to all my emails. So every time I send out an email, or if your lead volunteer sends out an email, which they usually will CC me on, then I would ask that when you read the email, just reply really quickly to whoever sent the email and just be like, okay, got it, or sure. Like it can be something as simple as that. But just to know so just so we know that you read the email, and kind of understand what we're saying, and just for our benefit. So that'd be great. So now I'm going to explain a little bit about the diagnostic test, which is probably the most confusing part of this program. So depending on what grade each of your students is in, that's kind of how you're going to handle this. But basically the first thing you do is when your student walks in, you have a spreadsheet, and I'll show you the spreadsheet right now. This is what the spreadsheet looks like. Just make this bigger. Yeah. So in these empty boxes up here, you're going to write each of your students' names and grade. And then what you're going to do is you're going to go down this list and ask them questions orally from this list to kind of get a feel of where they are. So what you would do is you start with the first module here, add 0 through 5, 0 through 5. This is the corresponding diagnostic packet, and these are some sample oral questions that you can ask. So so you would ask your student, okay, what's 2 plus 3? And they'll answer 5. Or they'll be like, oh, I don't know. And so if they do know the answers to all 4 of these questions, then you go ahead and put a check mark in this box. Then you can move on to the next module and ask them these questions. And if they don't know those, you can put a check mark in this box, etc., etc. And that's how you kind of go down the list. And let's say you get to all the way down here, and they can't do this, and these problems, and it says over here, you can either do orally or by writing them down, because they're a little bit bigger numbers and some students find it hard to do that in their head. So it's totally fine, you can write those down. But let's say they get to this point and they can't do it anymore. So this is kind of where you'd stop. And so you'd have check marks all the way, and then stop. And so you do that for all of your students, and then once you find that each person's stopping point, you would find the corresponding diagnostic packet, which is written over here. And that's what you're going to go and print out from our website. And you're going to give your student that packet. And then once they do that packet, if they can do it really easily, great, move on to the next packet. Otherwise, this packet will basically help you figure out where in the program your student is, and kind of give you a corresponding packet to start with. So basically, each of these diagnostic packets are all of the entire module scaled down into 1 or 2 sheets, or each packet really scaled down into 1 or 2 sheets. So on the bottom, you would see at the bottom of a diagnostic packet, you can see what packet it would correspond to, and that's kind of where you start in our program. Yeah, so that's our diagnostic test. Definitely ask me questions about that, because that can be very confusing. So let's move on. So I keep talking about modules, and you might be thinking, what are modules? So modules are basically how our program is broken down into. So for instance, you can see here some of the module examples are add 0 through 5 to 0 through 5, which I talked about earlier. And on the bottom here, you can see these are all the packets in the modules 0 through 5, 0 through 5. And all these packets, when you put them together, basically create a module. And that's what it is. And this website down here is where you can access all of our sheets that you're going to be printing out and stuff. And I'll send you more details about that later too. So about videos, we are currently in the process of creating videos to go along with each packet. So each student can go home and watch those videos. And yeah, so basically we wouldn't really watch those videos in the class, but you would email it to their parent along with their homework, and then the parent can ask the child to watch it at home. So kind of a walkthrough of our program. So as you can see here, your student comes to the session once a week, and it's your job as a volunteer to take their homework sheets that they did and look through it, make sure there's not really any mistakes. If there are any mistakes, quickly ask them. If they can fix it really quickly, great. If not, then that's kind of an indicator that they don't really understand the material fully. Another really important aspect of this is the oral assessment, which is basically you take a couple random problems from the packet and you just ask them orally those questions, and if they can answer it, then it's kind of also like an indicator that they do understand the subject matter. And of course, once you get into higher and higher, let's say like two-digit addition and stuff, that won't really work because you can't really ask them orally that kind of stuff. But for most of the basic addition and subtraction and multiplication, division, you can definitely use this technique. So once you figure out whether they have finished the packet and they understand the material, then you can give them accordingly you can give them another packet. So the packet you would give them for classwork would either be the same packet, a previous packet, or the next packet. So what I mean by a previous packet is, let's say you want to go back and review something. Like, let's say you're doing two-digit addition, and you're like, oh, this person is having a problem with just basic addition. So you want to go back and do the review sheets, and that's totally fine. That's something you can do and decide when you look at their homework packets. So once they do the classwork packets at the end of the class, after you help them throughout the class, at the end of the class, you're going to review their sheets again. Kind of do the same oral assessment type thing and kind of make sure they're doing all okay and figure out what you're going to give them for homework. And then you're going to give that to them for homework. And then they go at home and they do that. And if needed, they can also watch a video, and if we have a video for that. So that's how our classes work. So, like I said earlier, one of your important duties is to keep track of the progress of all your students. So we have a student tracker in the form of a Google spreadsheet, which will help you do this. So basically, you're supposed to write down all the classworks and the homework that you give your student, and this will kind of help you as a volunteer, and it'll also help me. It'll help you because you write it down, you write all the stuff down right after the session happens, and that way when you come back to it next session, you know, and you don't like what you want to give them and what you thought about the progress of that student, and you won't have to think about it too much. It also helps me, so if I go on the spreadsheet, I can see how each student is doing and kind of monitor the students as well. So another tool that will really help you, especially if you can't fill out the Google spreadsheet right there during the class and you have to go home and fill it out or something, but we would really encourage you that you do it at the actual class. But if you can't, what would really help you is the volunteer instruction sheet, which looks like this. And what this is basically, this would be the front of each of the packets that you give your student. So you would write your name, the student's name, and the date. And usually there's some sort of instructions for you as to how to teach the kids. And then if you want to have any notes for yourself or for the student or for the student's parents, you can write them down over here. And hopefully the parents will look at them. And here's kind of like a basic checklist that will help you. So whenever the student arrives in class, it says over here like check homework practice sheet and then ask oral questions. That's just a reminder, so you make sure that you ask them orally. And then depending on whether this one packet is classwork or homework, you would fill out one of these sections, which is kind of helping you figure out which packet you want to give them next. And it shows you like, okay, if you want to repeat this practice sheet, okay, well, what is this practice sheet? Or if you want to do the next one, it'll tell you what the next one is. That way you don't really have to think about it too much. You can easily fill it out. So that's supposed to be helpful for you, and it'll be easier if you're trying to fill out this Google spreadsheet. So you don't have to go look at their website. You can just be like, oh, this is the next packet, and you can just write it down. So this is what a student tracker looks like. On this side, you have your student name and your student grade. And then here you have 2 columns per class, one for classwork, one for homework. And this is kind of like the way you write down each packet. So you start off with the module name, and then you go to the packet name. So I can show you it down here. This is written right here. And you just copy that onto the Google spreadsheet, that name, which is on the bottom of each packet. And so here you write dash, 2 dashes whenever they don't come to class. And if you do know the reason, then you can say, sick or traveling or whatever it is, you can write that. But for the most part, we just want to know that they're absent. So you just put the dash dash there. Yes, that's what a student tracker looks like. The only time you don't give them any homework is after an evaluation or after a diagnostic test, for the most part, unless, but there is the option, of course, where it's like, okay, a student doesn't finish a packet during class, you can give them the rest of the packet for homework, so that's fine. But for the most part, you always have some sort of homework. So just some general guidelines, just things that you shouldn't do or you should do to kind of make the program run smoother. So first of all, and one of the most important things is do not laugh at the students' mistakes. Sometimes they may seem super silly and be like, oh my god, how can this person do this? But, you know, they do have feelings, even though they're small. They understand what you're saying. So even if you're like whispering to another volunteer, be like, oh, look what my student did. Like, that's not okay. Like, you can't do that, because they understand that and then they feel bad and they get discouraged, and we don't want that. So please don't laugh. Second of all, we want to steer them away from using their fingers, because they become reliant on their fingers, and we don't want that. So instead of using your fingers, we would encourage them to either use number lines or pictures, or a sequential method, which I'll explain later on, or just mental math. So definitely try to encourage them to not use their fingers. Also, make sure you're checking their work while they're doing it. So it's not like you give them the packet and then kind of move on and be like, okay, now they're working on the packet, and come back to it when they're done. Make sure that you're watching over them and make sure that they are doing it correctly, because sometimes they think they're doing it correctly, but they're actually not. But at the same time, try not to be too conspicuous about it, because they get kind of nervous, and then they kind of just like look at you and they don't really know what to do. So just try to be inconspicuous about it as much as possible, but do make sure that you're checking what they're doing. And then generally just be polite, like, and just be really nice to the kids. Like, don't be mean, don't put them down. So, like, if they do need help, you can approach them by asking, like, can I help you, or do you need some help? Like, don't be like, oh, look, you did that wrong. One of the things I like to do is, if I do see a mistake, I just be like, oh, can you do this problem for me again? Instead of like, oh, look, you did that wrong. So that helps a lot. Also, I would say no parents in the classroom, just as a general rule, just because it makes it hard for the student, it makes it hard for the volunteer. And lastly, just make sure that you can maintain confidentiality of all the student registration information. So let's go over some logistics really quickly. There's going to be one printer per class, just in case you need to print something out during the class. But for the most part, it's your responsibility to print out all the sheets that you need, which includes homework and classwork for each of your students. So you have to make sure that all your sheets are printed out before class. So whether you print it out after the previous class, whether you print it out during your free time, or whether you print it out right before the class, just make sure that they're all done before the students come. So you can either print in the library, which we can set you up with, or you can print at home, and we can provide you with paper. But we totally understand that sometimes, like, you may be like, oh, I'm going to give this to my student, but then you find out that, oh, they can't really do this, you want to repeat a packet or whatever it is, in which case we do have the one printer in the classroom, which you can print sheets from. Otherwise, if there isn't one, then you can just go ask your volunteer buddy to cover for you for a couple minutes while you just go run to the library and print out whatever you need. But yeah, for the most part, just make sure that you print out all your sheets beforehand. And then just make sure you're organized, whether it's, you just paper clip your students' classwork and homework together, and you make sure you write down their name on it so you know whose it is, or whether it's putting post-its, whatever it is, make sure you're organized, and whatever works for you is totally fine. So a bit more logistics. Please come a couple minutes early so you can set up and make sure the room is ready, and arrange all the tables and chairs and things. And kind of how it generally works is that each volunteer has their own table, and you sit down at your table, and the students come to you and they sit down and you work with them that way. That way it's not too chaotic when class starts. And I think I mentioned this earlier, but just in case, if you are absent for some reason, you can't come, which which shouldn't be too many times, but if you are for some reason, you have to inform me, the lead volunteer, and your volunteer buddy, so one of us can cover for you or can figure out who will cover for you. And just make sure that we have acknowledged or replied to your email or whatever it is, just so that we have acknowledged that you're not going to be there and that we've done something about it. If possible, we ask that you print out the sheets for all your students and either leave it at the library for someone to pick up, or you give it to your buddy or somehow work it out, just so it doesn't make, so that's just so your buddy doesn't have to do too much work, or whoever is covering for you doesn't have to do too much work. And of course, please tell us as much as in advance as possible, because it becomes really hard to figure out things last minute. So we say at least 48 hours unless it's some sort of an emergency. Okay, so let's move on to teaching techniques. So these are just some basic teaching techniques to kind of give you a substitute for using your fingers. So for addition, there's 4 different ways you can do it. So pictures is basically, you can see it in this sheet right here where my cursor is at. So let's say you have 3 plus 1 equals 4. So you can see that there are 3 dogs and then 1 more dog, and then you see, well, 3 plus 1 equals 4. So now there's 4 dogs over here. And I mean, of course, you don't really have to draw dogs, but something as simple as dots will do, or stars. It kind of just is a visual reminder, and it's kind of a substitute for using your fingers. Second thing is the number line, which is you can see an instruction sheet for number lines down here. All you guys know how to use number lines, so just teach your student how to do that, and we have basically just plain sheets of number lines that your student can use. So that's also really encouraged. It's one of our more popular techniques. The third one is recognizing a sequence, which basically means, so in our sheets, going back to the other example, the first 2 pages are basically going sequentially. So like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 plus 3. And this packet, by the way, is called adding 0 to 5, 0 to 5, add 3. So the first couple sheets are sequentially. So, if you have what the sequential technique is, if you have 1 plus 3 equals 4 and 2 plus 3 equals 5, then what does 3 plus 3 equal? Well, if 2 plus 3 equals 5, then 3 plus 3 would just be 1 more than 5, because 3 plus 3 comes after 2 plus 3. So that would be 6, which is 1 more than 5. So that's that technique. And then, of course, mental math, which is basically, I know what 3 plus 1 equals, or you can count up in your head. Let's say like 3 plus 1, so 3, 4. Instead of using your hands, you use your brain, pretty much. So it's very similar for subtraction. You have the same 4 ways over here, but we have one more way called counting up or counting back. So let's say you have like 4 minus 2. So you start with 4, and if you're doing the counting back method, you would go 4, 3, 2, because you're going back 2 spots, or you're subtracting 2. And the counting up method is if you have a little bit bigger numbers, let's say 8 minus 6, then you would start with a smaller number, 6, and count the number of jumps it takes you to get to 8. So 6, 7, 8. And that's 2 jumps to get to 8. So 8 minus 6 equals 2. So those 2 methods are pretty useful too for teaching subtraction, which you can teach your kids. Here are some special sheets that kind of require different, kind of just sitting down with them explaining the concept. So I'll come back to adding 9, but the first one is adding facts, which is basically, you can see an example over here, which is basically, let's say you have 3 plus 1 equals 4, then if you flip that, so it becomes 1 plus 3, and that also equals 4, and it's kind of the concept. So basically you would go through this instruction sheet with them and kind of just make sure that they're using the concept throughout the packet and not just doing each problem individually. The next one is adding sums, which is basically this packet right here. So let's say this example is, well, how many different ways can you group 5? So you have like 5 plus 0, you have 4 plus 1, 3 plus 2, 2 plus 3, etc., and they all equal 5. And so that's also a really useful concept that you have to kind of sit down with them and explain to them so they can do the packet a lot more easier. The last one is adding doubles. And doubles are basically, 3 plus 3, 4 plus 4, 5 plus 5, etc., etc. And we, basically the main goal of that packet is just so that you can memorize those, because those are really useful for being a basis for the rest of your addition. So when they do those packets, just encourage your students to be able to memorize those pretty much. And going back to the adding 9 packets, just because adding 9 is such a big number, there are a couple of techniques you can use. So kids, of course, love to add 10 because it's a whole number and it's really easy to add 10. So one method you can use is instead of adding 9, you can do 10 minus 1, which is basically, let's say you have 9 plus 8. So let's say 8 plus 9. So instead of adding 9, you would add 10 and then subtract 1. Of course, this is only if the student understands subtraction. And the second method is 9 wants to be 10. Or let's say you have 8 plus 9. So 9 really, really, really wants to become 10. So you add 1 to 9, but then you have to take a 1 away from 8 to make the same sum. And some students kind of intuitively get this, even though they don't know subtraction. So instead of 8 plus 9, it becomes 7 plus 10, which is the same problem pretty much. So that's also a good technique. And then for multiplication, kind of the same sequential thing, where it's like, if you have 3 times 1, 3 times 2, 3 times 3, and let's say 3 times 2 equals 6, then what does 3 times 3 equal? So it would just be 6 plus 3 because you're adding one more group of 3. So that's a sequence thing. And then, of course, there's a grouping, which is basically if you're doing 3 times 3 and you have 3 groups of 3 and you count up, let's say, the number of dots or stars or whatever you're drawing, and that's how you get your answer. So just kind of some miscellaneous things. So as a volunteer, what do you do if students don't show up for multiple weeks in a row? So on the Google spreadsheet with the tracker, there is a tab on the bottom that has all the student registration information. So you can find the parent's email and you can send them a respectful email just asking, why haven't they come, and is this something that we did wrong, or whether they plan to attend in the future, and kind of just give them that reminder that there's this class and you've committed to it and please come. And then if they respond to that email, or even if they don't respond and they don't continue to come even after that, email me and your lead volunteer letting them know, and we will take them out of the program and give that spot to another student who is more committed. And kind of what I talked about earlier, I asked that you respond to all of our emails just so we know that you read it and you saw it and that you understand the information in it, because sometimes the information is really important. It can be as simple, just got it, or yeah, sure, but just make sure to read through the email, and that if I do ask you any questions, and I usually try to summarize at the end of please respond to me with blah, blah, blah. Just make sure you do answer those questions. But if not, just a simple got it or sure is totally fine. So here's our schedule for this coming session. So the Berryessa Library, it starts January 19th on Saturdays at 1 p.m. Evergreen Library starts on Tuesdays, and there's 2 different sessions, 4:30 and 5:30, and it starts on January 15th. And Hillview is on Wednesdays at 5:30, and it starts on February 6th. So that's that. So I really hope that you found this presentation enlightening, I guess. I know this was a lot of information to take in, and so I really, really encourage you to email me with any questions you have, and don't be afraid. I'm not gonna bite. And I really, that's what I'm here for. I really appreciate when people come ask me questions. So definitely, if there's anything that was kind of confusing, or if you just need clarification on, you can just email me, Urvi at OneInMath.com. That's URVI at OneInMath.com, and hopefully I can clear that up for you. So I hope you guys have fun volunteering, and see you soon, hopefully. Thank you.